Good morning. Morning and welcome to Emerging Threats Monday. We're waiting for a couple of folks to jump on here. Oh, look, Will Parker is on. Good morning, Will. We'll be talking about something near and dear to your heart up there today. We'll give it a few more minutes for everybody to jump on. Morning, brother. On my end, I'm getting a transcription, and it's not very accurate. Good morning and welcome to Emerging Threats Monday. We'll give it another few seconds or a minute or so. Feel free to sip your coffee. Got a good show for you this morning, man. Good morning, sir. How are you down in Brunswick, Georgia? Did you guys get some storms like we did up here in Tennessee last night? Razmik is on. Good morning. How's the volume, guys? I should have asked a few seconds ago. Is the volume okay? Somebody give me a sound check. Morning, Eric. Razmik. How's my volume? And then we'll get started. 16 folks on. Please like and share. It's Emerging Threats Monday on a rainy day in Tennessee. Steve says great volume. All right, cool. Lisa Rodriguez, good morning. Christopher Perez, good morning. Morning, sir, from Brooklyn. Always good. Yeah, lots of storms here last night. Okay, we got 20 folks on. I'm going to go ahead and kick it. Good morning and welcome to Emerging Threats Monday with your host, Rich Brown. I'm also the co-host and co-founder of the American Warrior Society and the American Warrior Show, America's leading self-defense podcast. I'm a retired Marine Corps officer, former police officer, former regional manager for disaster preparedness for the American Red Cross. And boy, are we going to talk about it as potential disaster today. Boy, oh boy. Today on Emerging Threats Monday, we're going to talk about the Yellowstone Supervolcano. Everything that I'm going to talk about today is going to be in the show notes. And I got to be honest with you, most of what I use for today's show is taken from an excellent book, A Short History of Nearly Everything by Bill Bryson. I really enjoyed that book. But before we get into it, got some swag here. The American Warrior Show coffee mug, and they'll print your name and coin number on the back. So if you are a member of the American Warrior Society and you have a coin number like I do, then go ahead and pick one of these up. You can find our swag on the AmericanWarriorShow.com or AmericanWarriorSociety.com. Coffee I'm drinking, man. I'm drinking my normal Pete's out of my Nespresso machine and absolutely loving it. Let me know what kind of coffee you're drinking this morning. My wife tried Maxwell House the other day for the first time in probably more than a decade. She's like, man, this stuff is really good. So what are you drinking this morning and where are you at? I'll check the comments real quick and then we'll get into the show. Oh, my lovely bride, Miss Lisa, is on. Eric says, good morning, Rich. John says, good morning. Chad is on. Billy Smith says, the volume is good. Thank you, sir. 5x5. Donald is on. Whoa, we got 30 people on already. Hey, please like and share. Sean is on from Knox Vegas. Chad says, my workflow from home includes my mug from the first American Warrior Camp. Yeah, Warrior Camp's something we do annually. Don't know how we're going to do it here with this COVID environment, but it's going to be interesting to see. 36 people are on this morning, and we're going to talk about the Yellowstone Supervolcano. But before we do, the sponsor of Emerging Threats Monday is the American Warrior Society. We have free content. We have hundreds of articles written by experts. We've got hundreds of shows for you where we interview everybody, all the subject matter experts in today's field. And you can check out that stuff. 40 folks on for Emerging Threats Monday talking about the Yellowstone Supervolcano. And this is something that interests me because last year I ended up climbing 3 different volcanoes. I climbed Mount Vesuvius last year with my lovely bride when we were in Italy. And Mount Vesuvius, as you'll recall, is that volcano just south of Rome that wiped out Pompeii and Herculaneum. And if you've ever been there, you know how haunting that place is. But so we did that, and it was still kind of smoking the day we were there. It's pretty wild, that smell of sulfur coming out of the volcano's caldera. And then we climbed an extinct volcano in Scotland that is now called King Arthur's Seat. And then last fall with Mike Seeklander and Todd the Grizzly Bear Orr out in Montana, we climbed Black Butte, which is the highest mountain in the Gravelly Range, and it's an extinct volcano. So volcanoes are pretty fascinating things to me. In today's discussion, we're going to talk about the supervolcano at Yellowstone National Park, something that maybe a lot of people aren't that familiar with. I know I certainly wasn't. But we'll start today's story back in the 1960s. There was a gentleman by the name of Bob Christensen. And Bob was from the United States Geological Survey, and he was sent out there on a mission to find Yellowstone's volcano. Which sounds kind of funny because when we think of volcanoes, you can't really hide a volcano normally. You know, volcanoes are pretty conspicuous things. They create mountains when they come up. They got that giant smoking caldera, and you can't really hide a volcano very easily. But for some reason, nobody could seem to find Yellowstone's caldera. Now, it was no secret for a long time that Yellowstone was volcanic in nature. I mean, anybody that's ever been there can tell you those hot springs and geysers and bubbling mud pots and all this kind of stuff that makes Yellowstone the amazing attraction that it is, had to be coming from some sort of thermal activity under the ground. So Bob thought it would be relatively easy to find Yellowstone's volcano. But it wasn't. See, there are 2 types of volcanoes. There's the mountain building kind that as they create a mountain and then they generally explode. And then there's another kind that doesn't do anything. When it erupts, it just erupts and blows a giant hole in the ground. Those are the supervolcanoes, and Yellowstone was of that variety. Fortunately for us, there's about a few hundred active volcanoes, but there's roughly 10,000 volcanoes on the earth. So interestingly enough, at the same time that Bob is out there scouring Yellowstone for the volcano, NASA decides it's going to use some of its ultra-high altitude cameras to photograph Yellowstone. And then some official in NASA says, we'll take these amazing photos and we'll ship them to the Park Service. And maybe they'll make their way to Yellowstone, and maybe somebody will put them up in the visitors parking. Well, when those high altitude photographs came back to Bob at Yellowstone, he immediately saw why he would never find Yellowstone's caldera or volcano. Because the entire park, almost 6,000 square miles, was the volcano's caldera. And he would have only been able to see that from high altitude. It's not something that you can see on the ground. Yellowstone, like I said, as it turns out, was a supervolcano. And before I go any further, let's see who else is on this morning. Got 41 people joining me. Please like and share. We're just getting started, folks. James is on. Jared is on. Alan says, hello from flooded Southwest Virginia. Good morning. Gilly, good morning from the Philippines. Donald says he's drinking Freedom Black Rifle coffee from Texas. Awesome. Elkie says, Just Black by Black Rifle. Black Rifle Coffee Company, AK-47. That's John from Virginia. James Knowlton is on. Joe says, Folgers Colombian Classic. Nothing fancy. I appreciate that, man. Ted is on. Steven is on. Jared, crap, that's just down the road. Oh, yeah, man. Those of you that are on this morning that live up in that area, I'm sure you know it's a threat, but you're fixing to find out how much of a threat it is, that supervolcano that you guys live around. So here's the problem with these supervolcanoes. Specifically, we're going to talk about the one in Yellowstone. Yellowstone sits on, if you think of like these supervolcanoes, specifically Yellowstone, it's like a martini glass. It comes up nice and thin, and then it goes out to the super plume, which is what Yellowstone is sitting on top of. They estimate that the plume goes 125 miles down into the ground, and then it widens out to 45 miles across at the mouth, and it's about 8 miles thick of molten hot lava that's just sitting there pulsating under Yellowstone. So if you will, imagine for a moment, I take a 45-mile area, I stack it with TNT 8 miles high, and then I let tourists shuffle across it. Essentially, that's what happens every single day at Yellowstone when tourists are walking across this supervolcano. According to Professor Bill McGuire at the University College of London, he said you wouldn't be able to get 600 miles of this thing if it ever erupts. And what's worse than that, the consequences of an eruption would be way worse than the initial eruption. Now, Yellowstone has been a supervolcano since about 16.5 million years ago. It has blown up about 100 times. And about 2 million years ago when it blew up, it blew out enough ash to cover the entire state of New York to a depth of about 65 feet. Thinking of it another way, it could cover the entire state of California in ash up to 20 feet deep. So that's from just one explosion 2 million years ago. To think of it another way, the last time it blew up 2 million years ago, it was actually under what is now Idaho. So the reason we get such great potatoes out of Idaho is because potatoes love an ashy type soil. And that's exactly what you have in Idaho, because see, the supervolcano doesn't move. But as we learn from plate tectonics, the plates move across the surface at about 1 inch a year. 2 million years ago, what is now the supervolcano in Yellowstone was in Idaho, and as I'm told, 1 million or so years from now, it's going to be in Montana. So if you wait around, that's where it's heading, or so they say. So from the ash fall in Yellowstone, the last time it went off, it covered most of the states west of the Mississippi and parts of Canada and Mexico. If you think about all that ash coming down, and those of us that lived through Mount St. Helens time frame, we remember ash gently falling like snow. But I don't want you to think about that, and here's why. When you think of snow falling, snow is going to eventually melt, turn into water, and run away. Ash doesn't do that. Okay? When ash lands, it stays. If you think about it, it took thousands of workers 8 months to clear the 1.8 billion tons of debris from the 16 acres at the World Trade Center site. Imagine how we're going to clear off America's breadbasket. All the states that would be covered in several feet of ash. How are you going to grow crops? If it took thousands of workers 8 months to clear off 16 acres, how long is it going to take us to clear off Nebraska? How long would that take? And oh, by the way, most of the roofs that all this ash lands on are probably going to collapse under the weight. So when you think of it like that, it's not really pleasant to think about. Got 69 folks on this morning. Let's take a break, see who's on here. Got 71 folks on. Please like and share. We're just getting started. The Yellowstone supervolcano. Alan says, huge underground caldera. Yeah, man. Jim is on. Good morning. Good morning, South Africa. I see you on there, sir. Michael Seeklander is joining us. Good morning. Kevin is on. David is on. Good morning, Siwo from San Francisco Bay Area. I don't know if you're the Chief Warrant Officer or you're referring to me as a retired Chief Warrant Officer, but I'm damn glad to have you on this morning, David. Jan says, good morning, drinking Freedom Diet Dr. Pepper. Sounds pretty good. Rudy is on. John is on. Yeah, Gilly, glad to have you, man. Jeffrey Young is on. Good morning, coin number 1604. If you don't know what a coin number is, you need to check out the American Warrior Society. I'm drinking out of my American Warrior show mug, coin number 002. Clint is on. Good morning, Clint. We're in the Marines together. Ellie is on. Okay, so here we go. Now, all that stuff that I was telling you to the 85 folks that are joining me this morning about the supervolcano and the potentiality and how it erupts and stuff like that is pretty interesting, but it was all just theoretical noise until 1973. And something amazing happened in 1973. There was a very odd occurrence, at Yellowstone Lake, which sits near the center of the park. Suddenly it started overflowing its banks and the water flowed off into a meadow, and water that was flowing into Yellowstone Lake started flowing out of Yellowstone Lake. Well, that was odd. And then geologists started doing a survey of the area, and they found that the park was starting to create this ominous bulge. And the bulge between 1973 and 1985 grew by 3 feet high. And then something weird started happening in 1985. The center started receding to the tone of about 8 inches. It's now starting to bulge again. So there is something going on there. And this bulge was occurring across a 62 square mile area. This was no small bulge. This was a very ominous, very large bulge. And it was then that geologists came to the terrifying conclusion that Yellowstone isn't the site of this scary old inactive supervolcano. It was a very active supervolcano. As a matter of fact, it may not seem like it if you've ever been to Yellowstone or you've seen the beautiful pictures, but Yellowstone is the world's largest active volcano. And like I said before, it's a supervolcano. So there are other supervolcanoes on the earth. Matter of fact, the Hawaiian Islands were created by a supervolcano. The Azores were created by a supervolcano. Iceland supervolcano. But this supervolcano is the only supervolcano on land, and nobody really knows why. It was about the time that geologists were working, doing all the math and studying the fact that this park is bulging and something ominous is kind of going on down there, that they also began to work out its eruption cycle. Yellowstone National Park, like I said before, first erupted 16.5 million years ago and has erupted about 100 times since. Its eruption cycle is every 600,000 years it explodes. The last time it erupted was 630,000 years ago. So Yellowstone, it would appear, is way overdue for another eruption. And before I go any further, let's see who's on this morning. Got 80 folks joining me this morning for Emerging Threats Monday. Very happy to have you on this morning. Eli is on. Good morning, Eli. So what's the downside of covering New York and California with ash? I'm not going to touch that one, but it's pretty funny. Will says, I'll be gone then. Yeah, if you still live at that site, and it goes, pal. Not a lot of us are going to make it. Ray is on. Good morning, Ray. Jan says, wow, sounds like the Montana potato industry is a great investment opportunity for forward-thinking types. Yeah, you just probably have to wait for about 1 million years to get that potato farming area in Montana. Mike Seaclander says, how's everybody doing this morning? Eric says, good morning from Connecticut. Good morning, sir. Razmik is on. Drinking Dunkin' Donuts regular coffee, Razmik says, which is his favorite. I use Dunkin' Donuts creamer, so good stuff. Scott is on. Good morning, Colorado, training district number 4. David says, referring to you, LOL, I'm a United States Navy chaplain. Well, good morning, sir. I always said, we didn't have chaplains assigned to recruiting duty, and we had Marines, that were doing all kinds of stuff, and I kept saying we need a chaplain for the Marine Corps recruiting service, and we finally got one about the time I was retiring, and thank God we did. The spiritual comfort that chaplains bring to the Navy and Marines is invaluable, so happy to have you on, sir. Michael Reagan, Chief Warrant Officer for United States Army, retired. Semper Fi, sir. Always good to have another Chief Warrant Officer in here. Sean is on. Jared says, good break from Rona. Yeah, man. So here's the deal. Rich, you're fear-mongering again. Is this really a threat we need to worry about? Are there signs that, I know Yellowstone could potentially erupt, you're saying to yourself, but are there any signs, reliable signs that we can point to that seem to warn us of an impending eruption? To find that out, you got to ask Paul Doss. And Paul Doss is the geologist for the Yellowstone National Park. And Paul was posed that exact same question. And I'm going to quote Paul here. Quote, nobody was around the last time it blew, so nobody knows what the warning signs are. Probably you would have swarms of earthquakes and some surface uplift and possibly some changes in the patterns of behavior of geysers and steam vents. But nobody really knows. The problem is, as Paul would go on to point out in that article, all the signs for a potential eruption are there already. We already have them. They're all existing right now as we speak. Yellowstone is one of the most seismically active places in all of North America. Heck, all the world. It's one of the most seismically active places, averaging 700 to 3,000 earthquakes every single year in Yellowstone Park alone. Then we talk about, Paul mentioned that there would be some weird geyser activity. Well, guess what? Excelsior Geyser was one of the most, I guess it was on a good fixed cycle of when it would erupt, and Excelsior Geyser would blow to 300 feet in the air, blow water 300 feet in the air. And then in 1888, for some reason, it stopped and it didn't go off again until 1985. So that sort of abnormal geyser activity is another warning sign. We talked about ground swelling as being a warning sign. Well, we talked about 1973 to 1985. The ground rose by more than 3 feet from the last time the park was surveyed in 1924. So you have that as a warning sign. Another warning sign is, and I'm going to read a little bit of this, helium isotopes, man. Helium isotope 3 and helium isotope 4. These are critical tracers of what's going on in the Earth's mantle. The quantity of helium-4 coming off of Yellowstone is hundreds to thousands of times greater than what it should be. And this is a sign that something is going on down there. In fact, according to one report I read, preparing for today's show, combining gas emission rates with chemistry and isotopic analysis, the crustial helium-4 emission rates from Yellowstone exceed by orders of magnitude any conceivable rate of generation within the crust. Wow. So we got the swelling, we got the earthquakes, we got the abnormal steam vent thing. As a matter of fact, there's oil now, hot oil bubbling up out of Yellowstone that's melting the roads out there. We got helium isotopic analysis telling us that something bad is happening down there. And we probably need to be doing something about it. So yeah, let's summarize real quick before we move on. Yellowstone is a supervolcano. It's the largest supervolcano in the world. It's the largest active volcano in the world, although it may not look like it or seem like it. It has an eruption cycle. It first erupted 16.5 million years ago, and it erupts about every 600,000 years. The last time it erupted was 630,000 years. Supervolcanoes give off warning signs before they erupt. Every warning sign that a supervolcano can give off, we're getting out of Yellowstone. So what are we doing about it? Well, let's talk about that here in just a second. Let's see who's on. Thank you to the 82 folks that are on with me this morning. Tiny says, Rich, are you getting the Kung flu? I get this every morning, man. Half my whole life. I drink coffee. I don't know if it's the creamer in it. It reacts weird with my mucus. I have no idea, man. But I always have a little weird cough in the morning. Jan says, on a serious note, I visited Pompeii a few years ago, an awesome sight. That ash was hot, gases burned lungs, bodies charred. A horrible and inescapable event given the transportation technology of the time. Yeah, Pompeii, before I went there, if you would have asked me what do I think of Pompeii, I would imagine a small little few acres that you could wander around, but as Jan will tell you, it is a giant city, and you can go throughout the entire town and then go down to Herculaneum, which wasn't covered by ash. It was actually covered by the lava. So it kept it, both places were pristinely preserved, and they weren't even discovered until, I believe, the 1700s. But it will give you a little bit of appreciation for what these things are capable of. Will says, good morning. Sorry I'm late. Snow removal took a little longer than expected. Just happy to have you, Will. James says, sorry I'm late. Not a problem. We're talking about the supervolcano. Elkie says, awesome way to start the week. Needed more to worry about. You know, these are emerging threats, but they're also existential threats. And we're going to talk about why, you know, it's almost not even a good thing to think about these. But I think you need to have them on your radar. Adam just joined us. Gordon is on. My brother Jeff Brown is on. Good morning, Jeff. Adam says, morning from Jonesboro, Georgia. All right, here we go. 86 folks joining me this morning. Thank you for being on. So we just summarized. You know, we got this giant supervolcano sitting out there as a giant threat to America. So are we studying this thing? Well, not as much as you would hope we are. And there's a couple of reasons for that. There's a sense of powerlessness and fatalism that comes with studying a threat to the degree to which the supervolcano in Yellowstone is a threat to us folks. And people have been talking about these apocalyptic type events for millennia, and people suck at doing anything about them. And there's a reason why. It has something to do with the availability heuristic. And that tells us that most times human beings are really good about overestimating the potential for something to happen that that has already happened, that we have experience with, like war or famine. We've seen these things happen before. But we really stink when it comes to estimating the probability for an event that has never occurred before in human history, like the explosion for Yellowstone. The last time it exploded, 630,000 years ago. None of us were around back then, and we don't really know what happened or what could potentially happen. So how do we study something like that? It's definitely difficult to do. Well, in the show notes today, in today's show notes, I've put in there for you a downloadable preparation PDF. No, it's not a supervolcano preparedness PDF. It's just an all hazards preparedness PDF. Because, shocker, if the volcano goes off and you're not immediately killed, you're going to need a lot of dust masks to clean up dust and debris. I got a little tip for you, man. The skies are going to grow dark as this, like those of us that were in Desert Storm can tell you, when they lit off 500 oil well fires and the smoke blew across us, it could literally turn day to the darkest night you ever were in. So expect the world to go dark. Expect the grid to go down. Expect water to be contaminated. Expect when it gets dark and cold that crops are going to fail. So these are all things that you need to take into consideration. That the amount of ash that's going to be thrown into the sky is going to change weather patterns around the world and bury most of the United States, especially the United States west of the Mississippi, are going to be covered in several feet of ash. Now, is it going to happen in our lifetime? Look, folks, probably not. Just because there's a 600,000 year cycle, you could infer from that we're 30,000 years overdue, and that may be true. But just because there was a 600,000 year cycle before doesn't necessarily have any bearing on what may or may not happen in the future. Yellowstone may erupt today. It may erupt next week. It may not erupt for another 100,000 years. Is it going to erupt? Absolutely. It will erupt again someday. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. It probably won't happen in our lifetime, but it's something that we probably should be thinking about. Because good all hazards preparedness is probably what you need to be doing. You need to have enough food at home for a month or two. You need to have enough water for a month or two. You probably should have some generators and some of the other items that I'm going to talk to you about in today's show notes. So before I jump off here, I want to be respectful of your time. I've kept you on here almost an hour on Emerging Threats Monday. We've been talking about the Yellowstone supervolcano. Let's see if anybody's got any questions for me. Like I said, most of today's show was taken from the excellent book. I really enjoyed it. Bill Bryson's book, A Short History of Nearly Everything, and some other resources, but all the resources I use for today are in the show notes above. So let's see what people are saying on here this morning about the supervolcano. Let's see. Elkie says throat tickle. David says keyword is inescapable. Yeah, it's inescapable, no question about it. There's even reports been of irregular wildlife behavior due to the caldera. I hadn't heard that, man, but it doesn't surprise me. Animals are very sensitive to that. And as we talked about, Yellowstone is one of the most seismically active places in all of the country. 700 to 3,000 earthquakes occurring in Yellowstone National Park alone. Now, most of the earthquakes, of course, are the type that you can't necessarily feel, but they're earthquakes nonetheless because they're occurring deep in the earth. And as we mentioned at the beginning, the super plume goes down to a deep magma chamber running about 125 miles down deep into the earth. So let's see, Jeff is on. Good morning, brother. Gene is on. Just got here. Morning, crew. Could cause a mini ice age, Alan says. Yeah, that's exactly right. As the sun gets blotted out, aviation obviously can't fly because it's going to get... Matter of fact, if you look at some of the stories from when Mount St. Helen blew, planes were getting peppered with ash and debris several states away. When the Icelandic volcano blew up, it grounded flights around the world. And those were just tiny events compared to what could happen. Oki says, what would be a good time to switch? That would be a good time to switch from 9mm to 45. Robert is on. Scott says, lots of small earthquakes in the Midwest that we never used to have. I didn't know that. When it comes to earthquakes, at some point on Emerging Threats Monday, we might talk about earthquakes. The New Madrid earthquake is one that I worry about. It's right there along the Mississippi River. The last time it went off in the 1800s, it caused the Mississippi River to flow backward and created Reelfoot Lake here in Tennessee and Georgia. And if it happened today, it would destroy Memphis as a city. And again, I was a regional manager for disaster preparedness for a long time in the American Red Cross when I retired from the Marine Corps, so my brain thinks about these things all the time, so I apologize for being a Debbie Downer on Monday. Gene says, definitely hitting the show notes for the PDFs. Cool, man. Will says he likes the new background. Hey, thanks. I'm working on it. Trying to make it more professional for you guys. Trying to up my game. Elke says, my throat tickle makes no sense. If you don't see my comments before that, I said it's likely the dairy. Yep, maybe the dairy. Eric is on, says, I'm sure the rest of the world will come to our aid. Not. I think you're right, man. If we're relying on everybody's goodwill toward America to come to our aid, if we're hit like that. And again, the ash would take out part of Canada as well as Mexico. If you look at what FEMA is planning, the ash fallout, it really extends over, I think Florida, parts of southern Georgia, Maine, and a couple other states up there are going to be unaffected, but everywhere else, man, it's going to get blanketed in ash. So something to think about. Les says that the New Madrid is a real threat. Absolutely is. Alan says, what about the recent cluster of small earthquakes in the middle and East Tennessee? That is true. We've had them, and not really sure what to make about that. Seems a little troubling. But anyway, folks, that's all I got for you. Thank you to I think we hit 86, I think was the highest number I saw. I appreciate that. Today we talked about the supervolcano and Yellowstone, how it is the largest volcano on Earth. I know it doesn't seem that way, but it is. And how it's a supervolcano. We talked about it's been going off for about 16.5 million years. It's erupted violently about 100 different times over the past 16.5 million years. It's on a cycle, and we're probably going to get hit sometime. Is it going to be in our lifetime or our grandkids' lifetime? I have no way of knowing, but it is concerning because unlike when all that ash falls, man, it's going to be a mess, and it's going to be bad for all of us. So I'll take a look at real quick comments real quick, and then we'll jump off here. Ted says, something that massive worldwide famine for those not just killed. Yeah, exactly. That's why, like Dr. McGuire said, the University College of London, the consequences of it would be much, much worse than the actual initial eruption, which is pretty terrifying to think of because he says you couldn't get within 600 miles of that thing when it's going off without getting killed. So the kill zone would probably encompass millions, if not tens of millions of people just in the initial eruption. And the ash fall that would kill untold numbers as the world goes dark and famine sets in. Tony says, no worries, Bill Gates will have a vaccine. Hope so. Ronald says, I think it's all connected. If the Idaho Springs hot pond boils dry, I will let you know. CBD spray fixes the tickle. I'll try that. I'm a big fan of CBD. Matter of fact, one of our sponsors, Appalachian Standard, check out the show notes on AmericanWarriorShow.com, and you can find a really good discount to Appalachian Standard. They make some amazing CBD products. Big fan. Gilly says, when Pinatubo in the Philippines blew up during the 90s, it was an ashfall nightmare. The U.S. base was totally covered. We were not prepared for it. Recently, another volcano in my country blew. We were prepared totally, except those who lived near the volcanic area. Gilly, yeah, I remember that when it happened. I had left the Philippines about a year earlier, and I saw the pictures coming in of a lot of places that I'd been to. Lots of parts of the beautiful country that you live in there in the Philippines were destroyed. And I talked to someone who was there. I believe my friend Jeff was living there at the time, and he was telling me, yeah, man, this place we used to go to, this place, the roofs collapsed from the ash, totally destroyed. So, yeah, bad times. Jason says, good show. Catch you next time. Chelsea is on. Jeffrey says, great show. Thanks. Hey, listen, man, I want to be respectful of your time. I know it's Monday. Everybody's got stuff to do. I've kept you on here for 35 minutes talking about the Yellowstone supervolcano. Thanks for coming out. And remember, the fight is coming. Be ready.